All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live stream online version of Kabbalah and Coffee. It is great to be here with you this morning. First of all, I hope everyone is in good health and everyone is feeling okay. That's the main thing. Health is of course the most important thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody so that we can make sure that it's a nice and quiet environment. So give me a moment. Here's how we do this. I have just muted everybody, but if you'd like to say something, you can unmute yourself and then you can ask a question. So feel free to do so. In fact, this class, as you know, it's all about discussion and dialogue and conversation. So if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss, or any clarifications, feel free to ask. Okay, so we have a very important class today. The class today is all about jealousy. It's all about jealousy. And, you know, we live in a world in which oftentimes, I think, you know, maybe today a little bit less than usual, but in general, we live in a world where we're all looking at each other's stuff. Actually, maybe more now than ever, because as of a few weeks ago, you can actually, you know, maybe not be so much online. And today, everything is online. Everyone's looking at everything online. You know, the memes are cranking out. Instagram is hopping. Facebook is hopping. Everything is, social media is rocking and rolling. And we're just looking at stuff. And one of the challenges when it comes to looking at stuff is that we can begin to become jealous. We look at someone else's stuff and we say, hey, that looks good. Why don't I have that? Or I should have that. Or I deserve it. They don't deserve it. Why not me? Etc., etc., etc. And we need to talk about jealousy, because jealousy in certain traditions is considered to be one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, it's not, Judaism doesn't talk about deadly sins. It doesn't have 7 deadly sins. We have 10. No, I'm kidding. Judaism doesn't talk about deadly sins, but I will say that jealousy is on a list that is kind of deadly. And I'm referring to a list that's found in this text right here called Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. In Pirkei Avot, it talks about sins, or 3 things that take a person out of the world. It says there are 3 things that take a person from the world. In fact, instead of me holding up a book, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to share my screen, and you'll see it for yourself. Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen, and it is coming up right now. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yes? Okay, fantastic. By the way, again, if you want to share something, say something, ask something, please just unmute yourself. There's a little button. Just hit unmute, and let's schmooze.
Okay.
All right. Nice. It works. Okay, good. So I'm not alone. Okay. So, by the way, funny story, maybe not so funny story. I read recently how people in meetings now, and in corporate meetings, they'll put up on their Zoom a video of themselves, being present, not just a picture, but a video, and that way the boss thinks that they're on the call, but meanwhile it's just a video. But I'm glad to hear, Sandy, thank you for allowing me to really realize that it's not just a video, but it's actually, now, if you created a video that was timed perfectly, that would be very impressive. But that's another story.
It's really me in real time.
Now, if that was a recording, that would be absolutely epic. But, okay, let's actually look at 21, Mishnah 21. So just so you know, this is, I'm going to scroll up here. This is Ethics of the Fathers. You can see it right there. Ethics of the Fathers, chapter number 4, Pirkei Avot. This is one of the tractates of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the first iteration of the written form of the oral tradition, of the oral law of Judaism. There are 60 plus tractates within the Mishnah and the Talmud as well. But the Mishnah, again, is the first iteration. The Talmud is an elaboration on that. The Mishnah has 60 plus tractates, i.e. books, and most of them are legalistic in nature. They're all about the law. There's one that's not the law, but beyond the letter of the law, i.e., the ethical treatment within Judaism. And that is what we call Pirkei Avot, ethics of the fathers. Now, I'm going to go down. This is, again, there's 6 chapters, or five chapters, 6 chapters. Originally 5, now there are 6. It's complicated, but we'll talk about that maybe another time. This is chapter 4, and I'm referring to Mishnah 21 within this chapter, right here. Mishnah 21. So I'm going to read it. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar would say, envy, lust, and honor drive a man from the world. In the Hebrew, it's, I'm going to read the Hebrew words, Hakina, V'hataiva, V'hakavod, Motziin es ha'adam min ha'olam. Envy or jealousy, envy and jealousy. I don't know if there's a difference in the English, but in the Hebrew, they're interchangeable. And the word is kinna, which could either be translated as envy or jealousy. It's the same thing. So kinna, envy, jealousy. Taiva, lust, and kavod, honor, drive a person from this world. Now the question is, what does that mean? So, there are many commentaries on this. Some commentaries explain it means that it takes a person away from which world? The world to come, i.e. the afterlife, the reward of spiritual reward in the future time in the afterlife. So that's one explanation. But others say on a more simple level, what does it mean? It means it drives a person physically from this world. They are deadly sins. Again, I'm kind of paraphrasing these commentaries, but that's essentially what it is that these are vices, right? These are vices, and these are traits, emotions, desires that are dangerous and self-destructive. Envy, lust, honor. People kill themselves. First of all, people sell out their values in their pursuit of these things, or in the face of these things. A person is jealous, they lose all sense of morals and ethics and right and wrong. They're filled with jealousy. Lust, we don't need to we don't need to elaborate on that. We know the dangers of lust. And honor, the desire to have honor and to have power, these are devastating drives. There are commentaries that explain that these all three are sourced in biblical stories. There are biblical stories, cautionary tales, biblical stories that speak about these three qualities and their destructive nature. The example that's given in the commentaries for kinna, which is envy, is the example of Korach. Korach was a cousin of Moses. He was a fellow Levite, and as the Torah tells us in the book of Numbers, in the Torah portion, actually named after him, named after Korach, it's called Korach. Korach desired to be the leader. He spoke to the people and he said, "Oh, why Moses? Why Aaron? We're all holy. Why do we need any leaders?" Now, of course, when anybody says power to the people, what they really mean is that they want the power, right? The power to the people, I take the power away from those in charge and give it to the people. But who should represent the people? Probably the one that said that the power should be to the people, right? That's how it always is, right? Like in Animal Farm, yes, right? All animals are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. That's how it works. So any populist movement is always headed by leaders that are of the people until they become leaders that lord over the people and become as corrupt as that which they have tried to replace. But the bottom line here is that the commentaries explain that when a person is filled with jealousy, like Korach, it leads them to do things that are destructive, not only to others, but to themselves primarily. What happens to Korach? Korach wants to revolt. He wants to lead a populist revolution. Power to the people. Who needs Moses? Who needs Aaron? Everyone's holy, so I'll be the leader. What happens at the end? The earth opens up and swallows Korach and all of his followers. And their end is is devastation and destruction. Again, not to others. They tried to destroy the nation and the calm of the people. But what happens, first and foremost, they themselves are destroyed. And they're destroyed. Korach and his cohort are destroyed. As the Torah tells us, in a way that is unprecedented. Again, the earth opened up and swallowed them alive, which is not accidental, it's significant. In other words, the message of that is significant, and that is, when a person is driven solely by jealousy and the pursuit of power, and not for altruistic purposes, ultimately, that individual is lost. In other words, their entire identity, instead of being enhanced, is actually eliminated. It's because people see right through that, and all, again, on a very human level, all of their credibility is destroyed. So it's not like a death, a normal death, if you will, where the person, at least the remains are still around. In this case, the earth opens up and swallows them and then closes back up. Their entire being is absent, is missing. It's gone. It's lost forever. And of course, we're talking about Korach, so on some level his memory still lives on through these lessons. But the point is that the pursuit of these things really are self-destructive. There are other things that are self-destructive, but here Rabbi Elazar Kapar cites these three things in Pirkei Avot, and it's a cautionary tale about how we can be consumed as human beings with these pursuits to our own detriment, and of course to the detriment of others, but primarily, first and foremost, to our own detriment. So at first glance we would say, and we would be on really solid ground to say, that jealousy, jealousy has no place in the spiritual life of a human being. A person is meant to be content with what they have and not jealous. In fact, if you want to know what contentedness looks like, what does it mean to be content with what you have, all I need to do to show you this is to scroll up on this webpage right here that we're looking at. If we scroll up to Mishnah number 1 of chapter 4, the same chapter 4, the first Mishnah. This is one of my favorite Mishnahs in all of Pirkei Avot. It's one of my favorite, and if you've been around Kabbalah and Coffee for a little bit, you've probably heard me talk about this before. But if you take a look at the opening statement of Ben Zoma asks 4 questions, rhetorical questions. Who is wise? Who is strong? Who is rich? And who is honorable? And what does he say by rich? Who is rich? Take a look. Whoops. Who is rich? One who is happy with his lot. Ezehu Asher, who is rich? Hasameach bechelko, one who's happy with his lot. As it is stated in Psalms, if you eat of the toil of your hands, fortunate are you, and good is to you. Fortunate are you in this world, and good is to you in the world to come. The point is that the key to happiness is not wealth. Try that again. The key to wealth is contentedness and happiness, being happy with what we have and not looking to what the other person has. Okay. So the question, I see some questions in the chat. The question is there a difference between envy and jealousy? There is a difference between envy and jealousy. I don't want to get into the semantics in English of jealousy and envy. It's a good question. The reason why I don't want to get into the semantics is because I want to focus on the Hebrew term, which is kinna. Kinna is the Hebrew term, and that's what I want to focus on. It's translated in some places as envy and in some places as jealousy. But I don't want to focus on a word. I want to focus on the concept. What is kinna? What is it like? Why is it destructive? Is there any redeeming place for it? Does it have any positive qualities to it? And so let's take a few minutes to explore this topic. So again, we found in Mishnah 21 of chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot of Ethics of Our Fathers, it says kinna, taiva, and kavod. Kinna, again, envy, jealousy. Okay, we'll leave that for right now. But kinna, lust, and honor drive a person from this world. In the first Mishnah, we have another teaching that says What about wealth? Who is rich? One who is happy with his lot. So again, we see here, can you elaborate on the word for honor? It seems an odd word here. Yeah, honor. Yeah, so let me explain honor. I'll get back to jealousy and envy in a moment. Honor means the pursuit of honor, fame, being liked, being in power. It's an all-encompassing term. Kavod means a person wants to be the big shot, wants to be the one that everyone looks up to, wants to be the one that everyone honors and everyone, knows that they're in charge. It has to do with power. It has to do with control. It's all of that is included in the word honor. The example, the biblical story example that's cited, the commentaries, as I said before, in Mishnah 21, the commentaries give biblical examples for each of these three deadly traits, so to speak. And the one for honor, the example that's cited is from Jeroboam, or Yeravam, who was the king of the Jewish, who was the king of the Jewish nation in the northern kingdom of Israel. At a certain point in time, after the reign of King David and after the reign of his son King Solomon, so King Solomon's son was the Jewish king, but during his time the people revolted because they didn't like the taxation. At least that was, the claim was they didn't like the high taxes. So literally the kingdom split, and there became two kingdoms: the kingdom to the north of 10 tribes and the kingdom to the south comprised of 2 tribes. And they each had their own monarchs, their own kings. And the king of the north, so one of the kings, his name was Jeroboam, and he was a righteous person. He was a righteous king until he wasn't. And what happened? It says that he got so incensed, he got so, maybe you could say jealous, but he was so incensed about the fact that the Holy Temple was in the southern kingdom, and he was the king of the northern kingdom, and he didn't have a temple, he didn't have a Beit HaMikdash, he didn't have a holy temple, so he forbade the people in his kingdom from making the pilgrimage down south to go to Jerusalem, to go to the temple. He stationed guards on the roads to stop people, like checkpoints on the highways, if you will, from going down, prevent them from going down to Jerusalem. Furthermore, he erected temples with altars, basically idolatry. He erected other temples with altars so that his people could also have sacrifices. When the Torah says that once there's a temple built in Jerusalem, you can't put up any other altars and have sacrifices outside of the holy temple, outside of Jerusalem. But he did it. Why? He was driven by honor. Maybe a little bit of jealousy, but also by honor, the fact that he was the king. And he felt that if the people were going down to the southern kingdom and going down to the temple in Jerusalem, that he would be losing his power, he would be losing his honor, and he couldn't stomach that, and he destroyed himself. He destroyed the kingdom to the north, set them on a path of idolatry. Ultimately, the 10 tribes of the north were exiled and taken away and lost forever. That's why we call them the 10 lost tribes. That's where it comes from. That's the point in history that this happens. I mean, it happens a little while later, but this started this breach and this this negative state of the northern kingdom kind of started them down that path, and they never recovered. So what we see here is how the pursuit of honor and really power took a righteous person. He was, by all accounts, a righteous person, took it and destroyed him, and destroyed his people. So it's a terrible. It could lead to a lot of things. But getting back to the idea of jealousy and envy, again, the English is really not as important as is the concept. The word is less important than understanding the concept. So I want to focus here on this idea of who is rich, because that will help us understand this. So the Mishnah asks rhetorically again. Ben Zoma says, "Who is rich? Hasamech bechalko, one who's happy with his lot." And again, I pointed this out many times in many different classes and lectures. It seems to be reversed, because you and I would say, "Who is happy? He who is rich." We would reverse it. We would say, "Wherein lies happiness? It lies in wealth. If you have wealth, you're happy." But the Mishnah is very precise. It didn't make a mistake. It does it the other way around. Who is wealthy? One who is happy with his lot. If you are satisfied with what you have, and you're not looking at the other one, that's the key point. If you're happy with your own lot, hasameach bechelko, one who's happy with his lot, not with someone else's lot. If you're happy with what you have, then you are wealthy. That's the definition of wealth. The definition of wealth is an attitude. There is no objective baseline of what wealth is. Right? There's no objective baseline for what wealth means. Is it $100? Is it $1,000? Is it $100,000? Is it $1 million? Is it $100 million? Where do you draw the line? The Mishnah says there's no number on wealth. There's no number on what it means to be rich. So what's the equation? What's the formula? Simple. It's a choice that you make to be happy with what you have. If you are happy with what you have, then you're rich. If you're unhappy, then it doesn't matter how much you have. You're still not rich enough. You're still not rich enough because you're unhappy. And what's the key to this happiness? The key is to understand that this is your lot. Again, in the Mishnah it talks about third person, so it's his lot, but it doesn't mean his is yours in this context. I hope what I'm saying makes sense, right? In other words, it's talking about a person who is happy, who is rich, he who is happy with his lot. In other words, if I was talking about myself, when am I happy? When am I rich? I'm rich when I'm happy with my lot. Again, as long as I'm looking at myself, I stand a chance. The moment I start looking at someone else is the moment the floor opens, the pit of doom opens. Again, I'm using the imagery of Korach. The floor opens, and it's a bottomless pit. It's a bottomless pit of jealousy and envy and coveting, and they have, and how come they have, and how come I don't have, and it's not fair, and why do they deserve it, and I deserve it, and I want it, and I'm going to take it, and all of this scheming and all of this stuff. If God removed, magically, because God could do these things, if God were to remove the jealousy gene, the jealousy trait from humanity, the world, so many evils and ills and problems of the world would be eliminated. So much sorrow, so much problems. I'm not talking about problems that people cause unto others. I'm talking primarily about the problems that we cause to ourselves. So many of our own challenges are completely self-induced by looking at someone else's stuff. Famously, as the Jewish people encamped in the wilderness for 40 years, they staggered their tents. They didn't put two tents facing each other with the openings facing each other. They staggered their tents. Like bricks? You know what I'm talking about? Bricks are staggered, right? You have two bricks, and then the one on top of it is, in the middle and then on the sides. Yeah, you with me on the pattern of bricks? Okay. Yes. The tents, thank you. The tents were staggered. It's staggering to think. No, I'm kidding. The tents were staggered, and why were they staggered? So that the opening of one tent shouldn't face the opening of the other tent, which tells us two incredible lessons. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. When the evil prophet Balaam stands on the mountain, climbs up on the mountain to look over the Jewish people to try to curse them, God forbid, he ends up blessing them. And he says the words that have been memorialized for all of time in Jewish prayer. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanosecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. He says, how beautiful are your tents. What was he talking about? He knew the Jews were a people that were very intense. That was a joke. Intense? All right. Listen, we're not in person. oh, thank you. But y'all still need to laugh. No, he saw the Jewish people and he saw that their tents were staggered. The openings weren't opening opposite each other. They couldn't see into each other's tents, each other's homes. And he said, you know what? I was going to curse the people, but that's a beautiful thing. Matov Olecha Yaakov. There are two reasons why not having your tent open to the other tent is important. Number one, privacy. And number two, jealousy. And they're intertwined. When you're looking into someone else's tent, number one, you might see something that you shouldn't be seeing. So why are you looking at someone else's tent? So to prevent that, don't put a tent opposite the other tent. In fact, the Talmud derives from this law. Jewish building code. Some of you have learned this with me before. We had ethics classes on privacy. We had a class that focused on the ethics of putting up a nanny cam in your house. Right? People have nanny cams in their homes. They want to see if they have their kid at home with a nanny. They want to make sure that nothing is, God forbid, happening that shouldn't be happening. The question is it okay to have a nanny cam and not tell the person that there is a nanny cam? Can you record someone without letting them know that they're being recorded? What does Jewish law say about it? I'm not going to repeat that class. It's a 90-minute class. Very, very elaborate class. But one thing that we cited in that class was Jewish building code. The Talmud says, when you're building homes, do not build windows opposite each other in different homes. I know what you're thinking. We live in homes, we live in apartments, we live in homes where all the windows are across from each other. You know why? Because I don't know why. Because Jewish law is not being consulted necessarily. Jewish law says, do not put windows across from each other. Why? Stagger them. Create some sort of way in which it's not looking right into the other. Why? Privacy. But also, yeah.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like it's almost a contrast, because if these are attributes that are supposed to be had by the individual,
yeah,
but yet it's saying we're setting up an environment so you won't do that. So isn't it almost a contrast that you should be able, if it was part of your identity or part of you, you should be able to look in someone else's tent and not have these experiences?
Yeah, but Judaism is very, it's a great question. I'll tell you this. What I love.
Nobody heard my question, I think.
What?
Because everybody's muted. I don't know if anybody heard my question because I'm muted.
Yeah. No. We heard you.
Oh, they did.
No, we heard you.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for sure, we heard you. And I think you're raising a good question, and I want to share this following thought. I am always blown away by how pragmatic, brutally honest, brutally aware of the human condition Jewish law is. Jewish law doesn't pretend that people are better than that. Jewish law says these are people, these are their temptations. Let's try to help people avoid the temptation. So Jewish building code says don't put windows opposite each other. Why? Because it's going to be too difficult. Because why set a person up? The Torah says don't place a stumbling block before the blind. And that means not only literally, obviously, it means also conceptually. Don't set someone up for a challenge that they might not be able to overcome. If you have the choice, set it up in a way where the challenge is not present. That's the way that Judaism always acts. I'll tell you. Jewish modesty laws also pertain to human beings meeting each other. And many of you know this, that in Jewish law there is a prohibition of yichud. What is yichud? Yichud means being alone with someone else. Jewish law says Don't be alone in a secluded place with somebody that's not family or a spouse. Why? Because it could lead to something not good. In other words, like a man and a woman that are not married to each other should not be alone in a secluded place. You could ask the question, why not? Why not? Everyone should just be an adult and be able to to self-regulate. Jewish law says that's true, and that should happen, and please God, it always should happen. But let's avoid putting people in a situation where they need to call upon their inner self-control, because it doesn't always happen. And therefore, Jewish law says to men and women, it's not just to men, it's not just to women, it's to everybody. Don't set yourself up in a situation where it would call upon you to have to self-regulate. Yeah, of course we should have faith in people, and of course we should have faith in ourselves. But why put ourselves in a situation? Life is challenging enough. We don't have to put ourselves in additional challenging situations. So, for example, I'll just speak on a very personal level. If somebody wants to meet with me in my office, so first of all, my office is very small, so it may not be the best place to meet, number one. Number two, so it's better to meet in a bigger space. Number two, I'll always leave the door open and not close the door. Because that's what Jewish law says. That's what halacha says. Straight up. Jewish law says, don't be in a secluded space with another. That again, not that anything's good, but that's what the halacha says. So halacha says, Jewish law says, when you're building, Jewish building code says, when you're building homes, stagger the openings. Don't put them across from each other. Yes, you could put them right across from each other and tell everybody to put up blinds and not look. You could. And you would have to follow, and you should follow the law if that were the case. But Judaism, Jewish law is very pragmatic and says, you know what? Sometimes it's going to happen. Maybe it was a mistake, and now you're looking, and whatever it is. Bottom line is, don't do everything in your power to avoid having that possibility in the first place. So what's the problem with having tents that open to each other? Two problems. Number one, privacy, and number two, jealousy. Because when you're looking inside, the next step is to say, oh, they have that, how come I don't have that? Or I want that. And the next thing you know, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the expression? All bets are off, or whatever it is. All right, we're off and running. One of the most destructive traits that we have is our eyes that are looking elsewhere. We live in a time, in a society where more than ever, everyone's stuff is out there for everyone to see. And it's very challenging. Jewish law, Instagram and Jewish law are not necessarily compatible. I'm not saying Jewish law would ban Instagram. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the values within Jewish law and the value of a sharing thing like Instagram are not necessarily compatible. Again, I'm not saying it's evil or it's treif or it's no good or it's not kosher. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying the value of putting your stuff on display and looking at other people's stuff is not necessarily a tried and true Jewish value. Why? Because it can, number one, it blurs the lines of privacy, and number two, it might lead to a state of jealousy. We don't want to put ourselves into that situation where we're battling with that. So on a very basic level, jealousy is a destructive trait, and it's something that we are meant to stay away from. At the same time, like I wrote in the email, and if you're not getting the weekly email, just drop me a line, which I don't know what that means. You can text me, you can email me, you can chat me on this thing. Let me know. As I wrote in the email, every soul trait or emotion has a positive side as well. And the positive side of jealousy is, as the Talmud says, Kinas soifrim tarbe chachma. Envy or being jealous of one who is wise, of a chacham, or of a wise person, or of wisdom itself. Kinas soifrim. The jealousy of a scholar, being jealous of a scholar, is a good thing because it will lead the person to pursue wisdom, and that's always a good thing. So there are two forms of jealousy, one that's destructive and one that is constructive. If you're looking at someone else and you're looking at the physical stuff or the material stuff, number one, red flag. Number two, if you're looking at the stuff and you're asking yourself, why do they have it? How come I don't have it? Why don't I have it? That's not fair. I want it, etc. If that's the perspective, that's the attitude, not healthy. If the attitude is, I don't want them to have it, I want to have it instead, not healthy. If the attitude is, wow, that's a fantastic quality, I would love to have that quality myself, I would love to have that scholarship too, I'm going to work hard to become a scholar as well, then it's positive. Make sense? Yes? Make sense? So again,
Yes.
if we're looking at the physical stuff, red flag. If we're feeling like victims, why we don't have it, why they have it, red flag. If we want to take it away from them, red flag. If it makes us feel inadequate, red flag. If it makes us angry, red flag. If it stirs us, if it motivates us, if it's not jealousy, if it's simply looking at someone else and seeing a beautiful quality and saying, that is beautiful, I also want to strive to reach that level, and it motivates us to do good, then guess what? That is positive. And that is the positive inflection, the positive form of what we call kina, what we call jealousy. It's not a jealousy that wishes to take it away. It's a jealousy. I don't know if it's even jealousy. Again, forgive me for the English terms. It's really not about the word. It's about the concept. If it's about also me getting or reaching that level, then it is a positive thing. Okay. Beverly, I'm muting you just because I'm getting a lot of feedback when you're unmuted. So if you want to chat in the box maybe instead, because I'm getting a lot of feedback and there's a bit of an echo, at least on my side. Okay, Julie is writing a note, maybe, admiration. Yeah, we can call it admiration. Yeah, I admire that trait in another. Yeah, that's a good word. So in the Hebrew, you could also call it kina. You could use the same word, kina. But it doesn't mean envy or jealousy in the ugly sense. In the English, it's positive admiration. I admire that trait in the other. That's a great term. Thank you, Julie. I admire that trait. I also want it not to take it away from the other. Not because I'm jealous of the other, but because we're growing individuals. And to grow, a role model. To grow, we need to look at role models. So I look at this person and I see that they have a lot of wisdom. So I also want to study. And this person prays, davens beautifully. I also want to daven beautifully. This one gives a lot of tzedakah and supports so many good causes and institutions. I also want to be generous. It's not jealousy. It's not envy. It's not negative, destructive kina. It's positive. It's looking at someone else. It's looking at their qualities and saying, that's fantastic. I also want it. What's kina? What's destructive form of this? It's looking at someone and saying, why do they have it? I also want it. It's not fair. They shouldn't have it. I should have it. To give them the evil eye, to look at it in a negative way. All of that is the negative form of kina. Hope this makes sense. So, the bottom line is, there are few things as potentially destructive as kina, jealousy, envy, looking at someone and wanting it and wishing they didn't have it and wanting to take it away. There are few things as destructive. Just look throughout history. How many wars, how many interpersonal wars have been started over the fact that someone wanted something that someone else had? That's what it comes down to. Somebody wanted what someone else had, and therefore X, Y, and Z unfolds. How much pain and destruction and devastation and heartbreak and terrible things, horrific things, atrocities have been committed because of being envious or jealous of others. At the same time, it's important to look at others, again, to their qualities, and in a positive way, desire those for ourselves, not to take them away from the other, but to also grow. Because without that, we would be very content. We would be so content, we wouldn't grow. And that's also not kosher. To not grow is not kosher. We have to grow. And in order to grow, we need to encourage each other. And to encourage each other means that we look at each other and we see qualities that others have, and we tell ourselves, let me work on that. I also want that quality. That's a positive inflection. Every soul trait, every soul emotion has a positive version of it. Like I wrote in the email, every shadow is born of light. Maybe it's a very tall shadow. Envy, jealousy is a very tall shadow, very dark shadow, but there's also light there. And the light means, how do I utilize this for a higher purpose, to grow, as opposed to emulation, exactly, as opposed to having a takeaway from the other person. Is there, okay, so Matt is asking, I described a positive side of kina. Is there a positive side to the Hebrew word lust and honor? So it's interesting, right? So what's the Hebrew word for this positive quality? Like, what do we call this? If kina is the destructive side, so what's the Hebrew word for the positive side? The Talmud says, kinnas seifrim tar b'chachma. Kinnas, use the same term. Kinnas seifrim, being jealous of scholars. Use the same term. It's the positive side. Is there another Hebrew word that only expresses the positive side? Maybe, it's not coming to me right now. But clearly the Talmud is using the phrase very deliberately. It used the same word deliberately to tell us that this thing also has a positive side to it. It also has a positive side to it as well. Yes. I meant, is there a positive side to lust and honor? Again, if lust is... that's what okay, I'm sorry. All right, I'm just reading for those that are wondering what I'm doing here, I'm reading the comments. There is a chat. There's a chat box that you can pull up in your settings, and you can chat with me or with others. Feel free to pass notes to each other in class. I'm kidding, or not kidding, either way. But there are two questions that I want to address. Number one, Matt, I misunderstood the question. Your question is, we talked about jealousy and envy, but is there a positive side to lust and honor as well? The answer is yes. There's a positive side to lust and honor as well. Yeah. Lust, on a destructive sense, is lust. I don't know if I have to go into detail what lust is. Lust is sensual lust that could lead again to very, very horrific things. But lust is also positive. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. The Talmud relates the story that there were the great rabbis got together once. Okay. After the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. The first temple was destroyed, the Talmud says, because of idolatry. Oh, like I mentioned before, right? The kingdom to the north, they were serving idols, and even the kingdom to the south, eventually they also were serving idols. All right, so idolatry was no good. Was a terrible thing. It was a very big temptation. You and I may not be able to relate to the temptation of idolatry. Like, when was the last time you really deeply desired to put a little statue and bow down to it? Probably that's not on your top 10 list of things that you that you struggle with temptation-wise. So, but back in the day, that was a very big temptation. The temptation was to offer sacrifices and to worship other deities. That was a big temptation. So after the temple was destroyed, and after the 70-year Babylonian exile, the Jews came back and rebuilt the temple, and that was the second holy temple. The rabbis at the time got together and they prayed to God to remove the temptation for idolatry, and God took away the temptation of idolatry. Yes, Karen, you're right. We have many other idols today in the form of obsessing over material things, 100%. But in the sense of sacrificial service, idolatry, that was taken away at that time because they prayed and it was taken away. Then they prayed, the Talmud continues. Then the same rabbis, the same sages prayed that God should take away the temptation of lust. And it was taken away. The Talmud continues, but what happened was, in the entire land of Israel, there were no eggs. The chickens, the hens didn't lay eggs. Now, does that mean literally or figuratively? It might be a euphemism, if you will. But if you take away all lust, right? If you take away all physical temptation and lust and passion, well then we might not have another generation of humanity. I'm just saying on a physical level, on a biological level, then that, yeah. So is there a positive side to lust? Of course there is. Is there a negative side? You betcha. So there's a positive and negative to lust. What about honor? Honor is negative. We just said in the pursuit of honor, people do all sorts of things that are destructive. But honor is also positive. It's also positive. To be a leader is positive. To feel like a leader is positive. If a leader doesn't feel like a leader, then it's no good either. If Moses wouldn't have the strength to tell the people right and wrong, that's also a problem. So, as I think it was Sandy who wrote in the chat box here, yeah, it is safe to say that every trait, every emotion has a positive side and a negative side. Some are by default more positive and by default more negative, but you can find positive and negative inflections of pretty much everything. So the bottom line is that when it comes to jealousy or envy, or in the Hebrew kinna, it's very destructive. But it could also be constructive. It can lead us to growth and to climbing the greatest mountains because somebody else climbed it and we also want to get up there. That's fine. If someone else climbs the mountain and we stomp our feet saying, that's not fair, they climbed the mountain, I want to climb the mountain, in fact I want to schlep them down the mountain and I want to step on their heads to get up the mountain, that's not cool. That's not kosher. Someone climbed the mountain and you also want to climb the mountain. Gesundheit, hey, climb the mountain. Good. And maybe you'll inspire someone else to climb the mountain. The Rebbe said many times that while Maimonides talks about a value in giving tzedakah anonymously, the Rebbe said today people are looking at other people for better or for worse, right? It's the world we live in. And therefore, if you give money, if you donate something, right? If you support an institution, it's actually a good thing to put your name on it. Not for your own ego, but to inspire someone else to give. Even if it's also to get their name on something. In other words, inspire someone else to give. It might not be for the purest reasons, but the bottom line is they're giving. So there are positive ways to leverage these otherwise negative traits, because in the final analysis, these are positive and negative. It's light and shadow. You can't escape from the fact that it is both. Every cup has an inside and an outside. A person says, I just want the inside. I want a cup to hold my beverage, to hold my coffee or my tea or my water, right? I want the cup, but I only need the inside of the cup. I don't need the outside. Go create an inside without the outside. Are you with me on what I'm saying now? Go try to create the inside of the cup without having the outside of the cup. You can't. It's impossible. Because once you create the inside, then you have the outside. So God created positive qualities. But every positive quality has the outside. Every light has a shadow. You can't escape it. It's natural, it's inherent, it's the world that we live in. Okay. So, yeah, thank you. In the chat, if you want to see some Hebrew words in the chat box for these synonyms and antonyms, you can find, or synonyms, you can find them in the chat box. Thank you, Adi. Okay, so getting back to our discussion. Jealousy is destructive. Ultimately, it comes from ego. Ultimately, it comes from ego, that three-letter word that is the focus of our Sunday morning, many of our Sunday morning discussions. Ego is what makes a person feel, I should have it and they shouldn't have it. I should have it. If a person's reaction in seeing someone else's fortune, if the first reaction to seeing someone else's success is, how come they have it and I don't? You know one thing. This is driven solely by ego. This is the ego speaking. The ego is the one that says, it's not fair, I want to have it. What does the godly soul say? You have it? Fantastic, I'm so happy for you. Let me also climb that mountain as well. If we look at someone else's blessings, and our first reaction has to do with ourselves, how come we don't have it, and it's not fair, and I don't want them to have it if I don't have it? If that's my first reaction, I know this. It's coming from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of yesh, selfishness, from a place of ego. So today in our text, we're going to explore how ego is so prevalent, how jealousy is so prevalent, even in the realm of spirituality, even in the realm of avodah, of spiritual service. A person could be jealous, not wanting to emulate in a positive way, but jealous in a destructive way of someone else's spiritual accomplishments, not just their materialistic blessings or material blessings, but their spiritual accomplishments, and how devastating that could be. In other words, we're going to speak today about the dangers of kinna, of jealousy, of envy, of ego, in the realm of holy service. So let's begin. We're in the middle of chapter 14 of our text. The title that I've given this text is Learning How to Love, because ultimately this entire discussion is all about learning how to push away the ego and love another person, appreciate another person, and not look at the other person as competition. That's what it comes down to. Are they my chaver, my friend, or are they my competition? Guess who determines that? It's completely in our heads. It's completely in our heads. Are they my friend and I'm happy for them and I want to join them? Or are they my competition and I want to tear them down? It's all in our heads and in our hearts and in us. We have that power. It has to do with one simple question. How big are our egos? So now let's jump into chapter 14. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the screen to, let's see how we do this. Let's switch the screen to a different screen. New share. Let's see if that works. Yeah, amazing. It works. I love technology. Okay, in 3 seconds you should see this. You guys see this? Yes?
Yes.
All right, we're rolling through the PDF here. All right. We're speeding down the PDF highway. Chapter XIV, chapter 14. And last week we started chapter 14, and we spoke about how even when it comes to a person loving God, their ego can also get in the way. Because a person meditates on the greatness of God and he says, whoa, look how amazing God is. I love God. I love God. It's still about me. I, yesh mi she'ohev. There's still an I who loves. And why do I love God? Because I want to be closer to God. I want more of that divine stuff. I want more spiritual enlightenment. Again, what the problem, even in spiritual service, even in divine meditation, even in the act of loving God, ego could be ever present. And once there's ego, there's usually trouble that follows, or potential trouble that follows. But now we look at a different topic today. All right, this is page 28 of our text. And we are going to start last paragraph. I'm going to make it bigger. Last paragraph on page 28. Where I'm going to use my cursor here. Right there. The second approach. That's where we're starting. Let me set this up. In the previous chapter, chapter 13, we talked about two meditations. A love meditation and a broken meditation. The love meditation was meditating on the greatness of God, and that drives us to want to be close. The broken meditation is to meditate on the lowliness of ourselves. How far we are from where we need to be. How far we are from where we ought to be. How far we are from where God wants us to be. And that should break us open. That should make us feel vulnerable. That should make us feel not the greatest show on earth, but brokenhearted. And in this space of brokenheartedness, now we're connected with God. These were two meditations. Again, meditation number one was meditating on the greatness of God, and the greatness of God's accomplishments, and the greatness of God's creation, and the wonder of God's creation, and that lifts me up, that lifts my spirits, that lifts my mind, that opens my consciousness to want to connect with God. I want to run and connect with God. That's one meditation. The second meditation is on the lowliness of ourselves, on how far we are from where we need to be, on our mistakes, on our shortcomings, right? On the negative things that we've done, the hurtful things that we've done in our lives. And when we meditate on that, we feel brokenhearted, we feel regret, we feel shame over what we've done, and that breaks us open and makes us vulnerable, and now puts us in a position where we can really connect with God, because we're raw and we're open and we're real. We're not like pretending that we're perfect and being very safe. We're being vulnerable. And vulnerability is a way of connecting with God. As the Kotzker Rebbe once said, Rabbi Menachem Adlov Kotzk, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart. So a broken heart is the best way to connect with God. Fine. That's all chapter 13. In chapter 14 he says, yeah, you meditated on the greatness of God and now you're so excited. Is that about God or is that about you? It might be ego there. And even the second approach, which is the broken-hearted approach, the second meditation, that also could be filled with ego. And now I know what you're thinking. The second approach, the second meditation was about my own lowliness, the things that I've done wrong, the mistakes that I've made, the hurt that I've caused. And I'm vulnerable. So where's the ego? I'm shattering ego. Not so fast. The ego also likes to beat up on itself because it makes itself feel better. It makes itself feel kind of cool that it's edgy and raw. But that also could be coming from ego. Our own ego might say that it's cool to feel vulnerable, but that could also be from an ego place. So the question is it real vulnerability? Or is it still the same ego? That's the question. It's so hard to get away from ego. Let's read this inside. But let me just check in. Are you with me on what I just said? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, any questions?
Yes.
Let's ask right now before we read inside.
I do. Can I, want me to write it?
No, you can ask it. Why not?
Okay. So on that paragraph, I'm really stuck on the negation of self. Is that really what it's?
Well, I haven't read it yet. I'm about to read it, but yeah.
So far, it's feeling like, we're no good. We're never going to be any good, and we have to keep on telling ourselves we're no good until we're good, which is never going to happen.
Well, so again, it's a good question. He's not saying we should always feel like this. What he's saying is, as we said, this is really a callback to chapter 13. In chapter 13, he says, from time to time, we should use this tool to make ourselves a little bit raw, a little bit vulnerable, so that we can be more honest and we can connect with something higher than ourselves, as opposed to feeling like very comfortable with where we are and who we are. I'm folding my arms as a sign of being very comfortable. I don't know if you can see that. The point is, sometimes it's good. It's important to have this introspection. It doesn't mean constant introspection. It doesn't mean constantly beating ourselves up from time to time. The point of this paragraph, though, that we're about to read right now is to say that even when we're doing this, we have to be careful that we really mean it and we're still not doing it from a place of ego. That's the danger. The danger is that we're still doing it to feel better about ourselves. As crazy as that sounds. Let's read it inside. You'll see what I mean. All right, here we go. The second approach, that of humility, although generally involving negation of self. Let me explain this term, negation of self. In the Hebrew, it's bittul hayesh. There's two forms of bittul. Bittul means self-nullification, abnegation, transparency to something greater than self. There's two forms, bittul b'metzias and bittul hayesh. Bittul b'metzias means that you completely don't exist. It's like the perspective of light relative to the source of light. Okay, if you were light and you were aware, self-aware, you wouldn't be self-aware. If you were a self-aware ray of light, you would have no self-awareness. Why? Because you would know that a truth that's greater than any other truth, and that is that you don't exist. If you were a ray of light, you would know that you don't exist. The only thing that exists is the source of light. The moment that source ceases, you as a ray of that source's light don't exist. So the relationship between the ray of light and the source of light is bittul b'metziut or b'metzius. It's complete and total abnegation of self. It doesn't actually exist on its own. Human beings typically can't reach that level. The best we can try to reach is called bittul hayesh, which means that we are something, but we're going to be in this moment a little bit less something. We're going to be a little bit more humble. Not that we disappear, because that's probably not going to happen. It reminds me of the story of the rabbi and the cantor. Sorry, it's the high holidays. It's in Yom Kippur, and the rabbi, middle of the prayers, gets so involved in the prayers that he falls on the floor and he's crying, and he raises his hands up to heaven on the floor and he says, God, I'm nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. Without missing a beat, the cantor, the chazan, falls down to the ground and he says, I'm nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. And the back, Yankel, falls down to the ground and says, I'm nothing, I'm nothing, I'm nothing. And the chazan, the rabbi, turns to the cantor and says, look who thinks he's nothing. Yeah. So, thank you, Julie. If you don't know, you can do emojis or reactions. So we're emulating the class. By the way, most of the times, even in person, that's the way my jokes sound, with utter and total silence. So I'm very used to it. But I'm also glad if there's also laughter in your hearts. That's an important thing to laugh. So what's the point here? The point is that the greatest form of bittul, the greatest form of self-abnegation is where you actually don't exist. like the ray of light relative to the light. There's no ray, it's just the light. If you have a flashlight and you turn it on and the beam shines on a tree 100 feet away, you have illuminated the tree. And from the perspective of the tree, there's a ray of light on it. But that's not a separate ray of light from the source in your xenon or LED powered mag light. Who knows? Whatever that is, right? So it's just the source that's now shining on that thing. So that's bittul b'mitzias. That's complete another utter abnegation. Bittul hayesh means you are something. You know you're something. You exist. At least you think you exist. But you have this ability to be a little bit humble. You have the ability to be introspective and realize that you're not all that and then some. You have mistakes. You've made mistakes. You have flaws. You're imperfect. God's in control. All of this is healthy. And this is what it means. This is the second approach. The second approach is that of humility. So he says, although this approach is generally involving the negation of self, so it's about humbling self. It's about being a little bit more buttle, being a little less ego. Here's the danger. It can still be followed in a manner of yeshus. There still can be yeshus as ego. You can still have ego, even while you're being humble. That's how prevalent and how dangerous ego is. And here we go. He's going to give two examples. One may be conscious of self even within the state of bitterness and humility, even when you're in a state of dissatisfaction with self. And in a state of humility, you can still be very self-aware and be very filled with notions of who I am. And then, if that's the case, one's humility is not genuine. For the individual has not lost his identity to the point where he is like utter nothingness, which is the goal of this exercise. And to Sandy's point before, it doesn't mean that a person should constantly be in this state, because that's not always healthy. The example that I gave a few weeks ago was like surgery, right? So taking a knife and cutting open another human being's chest is not a good thing unless you need to perform surgery, unless it's a doctor performing surgery. So, as a rule, we don't self-humble. But when necessary, we need to self-humble. Sometimes you need to take the scalpel and cut ourselves open a little bit to make ourselves more humble. The problem here is that, as he's articulating, is that even in this process of opening up self and becoming raw and vulnerable and humble and very much self-aware and brutally honest with self, the problem is one might still be too aware of self. And then one's humility is not emes, it's not true, it's not emet. The Rebbe adds a sentence in Yiddish that Zubrochenkeit, the brokenness, is not real to the point that he feels that he is truly garnet, that he's truly nothing, utterly nothing with no sense of self. He's not truly broken, not truly broken. You know, as I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here, but you know when public figures make really, really bad mistakes? Yeah, it happens sometimes. And as the public, you know, we don't deserve anything. No one does, whatever. But as a public, we feel like we deserve an apology. And then people apologize, and then we analyze their apologies. Oh, they didn't say that they're sorry. They said they're sorry for how it might have been perceived. Ah, that's not true contrition. That's not truly regretting what you've done. That's only, you're upset that you got caught. Or you're upset that somebody took offense, but you're not really owning up to it. Okay, great. We have that outrage. Yeah, outrage. Ooh, he didn't do a good job apologizing. That's a terrible apology. Great, great. Let's apply that to ourselves. Let's apply that to ourselves. When we feel contrite, when we feel remorse over something we've done, how sincerely do we mean it? Is it that we got caught? Is it that someone took offense? Is it that you got busted? Or is that it's really, or you're really shattered by it? And that's what he's saying. A person can be allegedly brokenhearted and still not be brokenhearted. A person can feel like they have opened themselves up and are truly contrite and brokenhearted and humbled by what they've done, and really not be so. And it's not true. And it's not genuine. And by the way, this is not for anyone to judge anyone else. This is just for us within our own beings to judge ourselves. This is an honest question that we need to ask ourselves. When we felt contrition, when we felt brokenhearted, when we felt humbled, was it honest? Or was it ego-driven? Was our ego still there? Did we feel bad because we got hurt? Or do we feel bad because we hurt? Do we feel that it's wrong because of the repercussions? Or because of the wrong itself? After the brothers sold Joseph as a slave, and Joseph ends up in Egypt, the brothers go down to buy food. And they meet with the viceroy of Egypt to buy food, and that turns out to be their brother, but they don't know it's their brother because they don't recognize him. Because they sold him as a slave when he was 17, before he had a beard. That's what it says in the commentaries. And now, 20 years later, he's a man. He's 37 years old. And he's dressed, he's walking like an Egyptian, and he's dressed like an Egyptian, and he talks like an Egyptian, and they have no idea who it is. Joseph knows exactly who they are, but they don't know him. The Torah says Joseph recognized them, they didn't recognize him. And so he puts them through the ringer. He accuses them of being spies. He puts this whole plot and plan into place, only for their benefit, by the way. But we'll get back to that in a moment. At a certain point, when the brothers feel like they're suffering, Reuben turns, the oldest brother, turns to the other 9. And he says, I told you we shouldn't have sold Joseph. I told you it was wrong to hurt the lad. This is after the brothers are saying, I skipped out a piece. The brothers turn to themselves and say, oh, this is crazy what's going on. This viceroy of Egypt is driving us crazy, bananas. It's probably a punishment for what we did to Joseph. And Reuben says, I told you so, I told you not to. So what, is he the I told you so guy? He did tell them not to. But what's the point of saying I told you so? The Rebbe explains something beautiful. He wasn't saying I told you so. He was saying I told you it was wrong then to do. You feel bad about what you did then because you feel like this is some karma coming to you. You feel like now, 20 years later, some Egyptian viceroy is putting you through the ringer, and you feel like maybe it's the universe or God getting back at you at what you did 20 years earlier. I'm telling you a truth, Reuben says to his brothers. The reason why that was wrong is not because of what's happening to you today. The reason it's wrong is because it was wrong then. It was wrong to sell your brother irrespective of any consequence or lack of consequence that might happen at a later point. It's not because of now that it was wrong or that it's wrong. It was wrong then. Reuben is not telling them I told you so, but is telling them don't feel bad and regret the harm that you caused because it's raining on your parade now. That's still ego. The problem is because you hurt him. 20 years ago you hurt your brother. That's the wrong. It's not wrong because you're suffering today. Are you with me on this distinction? People apologize because now they're getting hurt by their actions. That's not contrition. But again, it's not about really anyone else's contrition. We're talking about a process of self-evaluation and introspection. And the point that he's saying is that you can be contrite and you can be humbled and still be filled with ego. Because you can make it about yourself. You can also do it in a genuine fashion, but his point is a cautionary tale. Ego is so prevalent, it even can interfere in our own bittul, in our own process of self-nullification. In the process of breaking down ego still could be front and center. Let's continue. Bottom line of this page. For the reckoning of one's thoughts, speech, and actions described in the previous chapter, it's possible that in this case, it has not touched the innermost point of his soul. For if he were truly touched to its very depths, he would lose his identity and be utter nothingness. Again, disclaimer, not always, not forever, etc. But in this one situation, it means that the person is a little bit contrite and a little bit open and a little bit broken and a little bit in a state of self-bitterness of not being satisfied with what they've done. And that's a positive. Again, in certain circumstances, it's a very positive thing, and it's necessary for growth. When he is not touched so deeply, however, his humility is not truly sincere. If you're really pained by it, then you'll really be broken open. But if you are really not pained by it, if you're only pained by the fact that, oh, look at what happened now, I gotta say I'm sorry, I have to make amends, etc. If it's not so genuine, then it's not so genuine. It's not so sincere. All right, I see some chats coming in. Let me see what's going on here. Ended with however last Sunday. Can you spell the two bittles? Falling pro. Okay, good. However. Okay, all right. We may have skipped the paragraph. It was in the parentheses. I'm going to keep on going. Okay. Furthermore, let's continue. This is top of page.
Can you spell the two bittles?
Yeah.
There are two different kinds.
Yeah. Bittul hayesh, that's the lower kind. Bittul. Hayesh. Hayyesh. Hayesh. The second one is harder. It's deeper. It's also harder to spell. It's bittul, the same first word. Bittul. B'metziut. Bemetziyut. B'metziut. Okay, let's continue. This is now an even more insidious form of ego within humility, within opening one's heart and being broken. Furthermore, he says, it is possible that though a person attains humility, he feels a secret pride and joy, a self of gratification at the knowledge that he has attained bitterness and humility, and that he is an oved, he's now a servant of God. A person might feel, look at me, I'm all broken-hearted and stuff. Look at that, I'm humble, I am not like everyone else that's filled with ego. Look at me, I'm humble. And what happens in that case? Yeah, not so humble. So a person might feel a secret pride and joy, and by the way, you know what it means by a secret pride and joy? It could be that the person themselves is not fully aware of it. You might feel pretty much brokenhearted, but somewhere deep inside, you like it. Somewhere deep inside, you're feeling good about it. You're feeling kind of proud that you have this edginess, that you're brokenhearted, that you're humble, that you're raw, that you're vulnerable. Not everyone's vulnerable. I can be vulnerable. I can be vulnerable. I can be brutally honest. I can work on myself. I'm not like everybody else. I am an oved. I'm a servant of God. Okay. Once again, ego.
I don't know, honey. I've never been.
Once again, we have ego going in. All right. Let's continue. Although these feelings are subconscious, like I said, you might not even be fully aware of it. They emanate from the essential yeshus, the ego, the essential ego, which remains intact within his soul, undermining the totality of a service. And this is a quote from the Talmud. It talks about an impurity, that when you have one trace of impurity, it messed up the whole situation. This little bit of ego can undermine the entire process of humility, of breaking ego, because a little bit of ego can go a long way to undermine selflessness. Consequently, the bitterness and humility do not produce the desired positive effect of elevating his soul, refining his character, and ensuring that he fulfilled Torah and mitzvot in a proper manner. The whole point of this was to grow, was to improve, was to connect. But if there's still ego, it ain't going to work. You have that little bit of ego in there, it's no good. By the way, to be very clear, he's not saying that there's no hope for anybody. What he's saying is we have to be careful that even in situations where we feel like we're meditating on our own failures, on our own shortcomings, on our own areas of improvement, and we feel like we're motivated to work on that, and it's humble and it's whatever, you have to be careful. Number one, is my ego still here? Am I really bothered by what I've done, or am I bothered by getting caught, if you will, or whatever the ego would say about that? And number two, do I feel good, self-satisfaction about this process? Do I feel good about being kind of open and broken and humble and raw and vulnerable? And if I feel too good about it, then again, it's driven by ego, and it's not really going to have the desired effect of really making us open and connected to God. Hence, let's continue. Oh, and by the way,
Rabbi,
yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question. So as I listened to you, to explaining this, what I'm thinking about is that in talking about it, in order to achieve to be that kind of selfless, anything you talk about has got to be without any pronouns, because when you say am I or have I or our or we and so on, that all of it is initiated by our intention, as very basic as that is as an idea. And so what I'm wondering about, in a good way though, is that how
do we ever get there?
The way we've developed, how you actually can step when what you're going to be doing is intentional, beginning with what I want to do or we or so on. That how do you begin to think about something?
Yeah, it might begin less for. Thank you. Good question. It might begin less from I want to become humble to this is what God wants from me. This is an avoda. This is a task that is placed upon me. In other words, this is what's expected of a human being, is to be raw, to be vulnerable, to be etc. So let's explore this process. I
hear that, but you're still saying about me, so it's still me. Yeah.
On some level, there's going to be a trace. It's very difficult. What I want to be able to it's a good question. Yeah, it requires work, going deeper and deeper and deeper to be more honest and more honest and more honest, and less about self and more about the cause and the goal and the other and God. What his point with all of this is to say that even when a person is climbing the spiritual rungs in a very dramatic way, a person is meditating on God and feeling a love toward God, a person is meditating on self and feeling brokenhearted, it might still be filled with ego. Hence, although he is an Oved, although he is a servant of God, his avodah, service, is insufficient, being characterized by yeshus, ego, and self-consciousness, rather than bittul, self-abnegation. Let's continue. This explains why even a person who is spiritual, even a person who's very holy, that's why he cannot tolerate a colleague who has also attained a certain level of service. That's why you have spiritual people who are filled with animosity toward others, jealousy, can't stand another person. Where does that come from? Not a holy place. Ego. They might be doing holy things also, but that all of that stuff, he says, is tainted by ego. The proof is in the pudding. If you're climbing the rungs and you look up at somebody, if you're climbing the mountain and you look over and you see someone else next to you and all you want to do is push them down the mountain, guess what? I don't even know how to finish that sentence, guess what? But that ain't climbing the mountain. That's not climbing the mountain. This also explains why he cannot tolerate a colleague who has also attained a certain level of service. The latter's achievements establish a parity, which impinges on his own yeshus and his own ego. Hence, he cannot tolerate him, can't stand him. By the way, none of this is saying it's a good thing. Saying this is terrible, but this is human nature, right? Hence, he cannot tolerate him or even join together with him. Instead, he hates him and tries to exaggerate and publicly expose all of his colleagues' faults and inadequacies. He denigrates the other person's avodah service in order that his colleagues should not be considered comparable or superior to him. You see somebody climbing the mountain. Oh no, I don't like that. I'm the one climbing the mountain. Disparage, right? Besmirch their name, push them down, negate them, all driven by ego. Furthermore, even if he is not concerned that others will equal him or consider themselves greater than he, in other words, he's not concerned about the competition necessarily. Nonetheless, the yeshus, the ego of such an individual, will not allow him to tolerate the positive qualities of anyone else. Even if he's not concerned about the competition, he still doesn't consider another person to have any qualities. Only he can have qualities. The other one, For this reason alone, he will hate the other, scorn him, and be incapable of communicating peaceably or linking himself with him. Again, it's all driven by ego. Bottom paragraph. This is particularly certain to occur if his colleague possesses a superior quality, whether in the area of intellect, study, piety, or purity. On whatever level, spiritual level, a person might not have the ability or might not feel that they have the ability to tolerate the other person, all because of ego. He will be infuriated, finding this more than he can bear. You find out someone did something good and you become angry, and all you're filled with is rage over the mitzvah that the other person did. Meshuggah. It's crazy. It's crazy, but it's a fact of life. It happens all the time. And his point here is, you would think the more spiritual you get, the less susceptible you are to this ego, to this jealousy. And his point, I'm reading between the lines, is, in this chapter is, it doesn't go away, and on the contrary, it might even become worse. Because as you climb, the higher you climb, the more jealous, cautious, afraid, angry you are about someone else climbing. The higher you feel you are, the more a threat you feel someone else is. Such hatred, bottom line of this page, such hatred is compounded by envy, jealousy. This is the word kinna, about which, top of 30, the verse states, envy is cruel as the grave. That's what it says. Envy is as cruel as the grave. If we could ever talk about a deadly sin, right? Envy is as cruel as the grave. That's pretty deadly right there. In general, envy is also included in the category of baseless hatred, for his colleague has not harmed him or taken anything from him. Here you have another fellow who's serving God, studying Torah, doing mitzvot, helping the community, living their life, and you're filled with rage? They're not doing anything to you. They're doing good things. They're living their life, and you can't get them out of your head. This is called envy, and this is called baseless hatred. Indeed, nothing prevents him. This is huge right here. Nothing prevents him from emulating what his colleague has achieved on his own account. Someone else did something good. Someone else came up with, somebody came up with a campaign. I hate that. I should have come up with it. So also do it. Someone came up with a good campaign, so do it as well. Someone had a good idea, emulate it in a good way. Don't tear someone else down. Don't be jealous. Don't be hateful. If there's a good thing and you also want to do it, so do it. Let that inspire you to do something. In material things too, you have to understand, this whole chapter is talking about spiritual things. At the end, he talks about, oh, by the way, people might also have material envy. In material things too, one envies another's success and wealth, even though he has taken nothing from him. Somebody else is successful, gets the promotion, the new house, the new car, the job, whatever it is, and all you're feeling is hate. Why? They've taken nothing from you. No one can take anything from you. That's meditation number 1. The antidote to jealousy and envy is, number 1, meditation is no one can take anything from you. That's it. If you believe that, then you're well on your way. No one can take anything from me. They have it, I can also get it. No one's taking anything away. Rather, it is God's blessing that brings wealth. It's not the other that took my wealth. God brings wealth. God brought that person wealth. God can bring me wealth. Again, this last 2 sentences are focusing on material wealth. The sages commented, and here's how we conclude the chapter: hate, born of envy, defies correction. Hate that is born of envy is very difficult to correct, because now you have hate compounding the envy. You start off with envy, and now you hate. You have this animosity toward the other because they have something that you don't have. Good luck correcting that. It's not that it's impossible, but it's very difficult. And the Hebrew is so poetic. Let me pull out my the Hebrew. Sinna, machmas kina, ein la takana. Sinna, machmas kina, ein la takana. Hatred, born of jealousy, has no fix. Defies correction is nice. Ein la takana means it can't be fixed. Anything can be fixed ultimately with the right work, but it means it's very difficult to correct. Very difficult to fix. So what's the bottom line? What's the moral of today's story? Number 1, don't be jealous. No one else has what you're meant to have. If they have it, you're not meant to have it. Theirs. You also could have it on your own, so then go get it. No one has anything of yours. Someone has the Ferrari. Yeah, I use that car because it has my name in it. It's Ferrari. Sorry for doing a bad joke as we wrap up, but hey. So someone has the Ferrari, it's not yours. It's theirs. So number 1, it's not yours. You want a Ferrari? Go get a Ferrari. They don't have your Ferrari. That's point number 1. They don't have your house. They don't have your spouse. They don't have your car. They don't have your money. They don't have your job. They don't have yours. You also want a house, the spouse, a job. That you also want that? That's another story. They don't have yours. That's meditation number 1. Meditation number 2. We can be inspired from other successes. Other people are successful. Let it inspire us to grow and succeed. That's a very positive thing. Next message. Just going through in the order of what we discussed today. Next message. A person who meditates on their own failings could at that very same time be in a space of ego. And their failings are bothering them because of ego. A person could also take gratification in the humbling process. In any of these instances, what it means is that a person's avoda and service, spiritual service, is defined and marked by ego. And that leads to the condition where, although on the surface one exudes a very pious demeanor, and anyone who looks at that person would say, wow, that person a tzaddik. That person, they love God, they're introspective, they're humble, but in their heart of hearts, if they see someone else be successful spiritually, if they see somebody else have positive spiritual qualities, and they can't stand it, we know why. Or they should know why. It's because notwithstanding all the work that they've done, they haven't eradicated the ego. The ego is still very much there. This is a cautionary tale telling us how ego is so present even in the space of spiritual service, even in those moments of holiness. Holy meditation, Batman, you might still have ego, and that can mess things up so badly. And how does it express itself? I could still love God, I could still feel humble, but how does it express itself if I can't stand the other? If I love God, but I can't stand Yankel. If I feel contrite over what I've done, but I can't get along with Shmerel, guess what? It means that there's something wrong. Something wrong. Something wrong there. Ego. Ego. Ego, ego, ego. The ego doesn't allow us to really, really feel. To really feel good about someone else. It makes us feel jealous about someone else. Why do they accomplished something, they study Torah, they study a lot of Torah, they're completing this tractate. I feel bad about that. Why feel bad? It hurts me. If it ever hurts us to see someone else's successes, spiritually or materially, it's a real call to look inside. If we hear about or witness someone else's success and our first reaction is dislike, we have a lot of work to do. And so again, the message here is not about the negative, although it's been, we are focusing a little bit on the negative, or a lot on the negative. Really, the focus should be on the positive. The positive being, how can we work on ourselves to eliminate the ego and to really value the other person and to value their successes and to love their successes and to celebrate with them and to prop each other up as opposed to trying to tear each other down. If we can let go of the clutches of our own ego and truly allow space in our hearts for someone else and their successes, we will be better off. We will not have the poison of jealousy in our minds and hearts. We will not be digging ourselves the Sheol, the grave. We'll be living in a space of joy and happiness. Not only our joy, but the other's joy will be our joy as well. And we'll extend our help to the other, and the other will extend their help to us. And we'll live in a peaceful world, a world in which we all get along and we all help each other succeed even more. Personally, that's the world I want to live in. And how do we create it? It's not anyone else. It starts right here. How do I live my life? And how do I deal with my own ego? So, I think we have a lot to think about today. And I appreciate you being on this journey with me. The goal of these classes Sunday morning, it's really about getting along better with each other. The key to getting along with someone else is not being about self. It's reducing, minimizing ego. So let's strive this week, as we prepare for Passover, the holiday that celebrates humility, the holiday that we eat the humble bread, i.e. the matzah, the flat bread, the holiday in which we have nothing leavened, nothing puffed up in our lives. Let's work on not only getting out the chametz from our homes, but from our hearts as well. Let's eliminate the leaven. Let's eliminate the ego, the hubris, the arrogance. Let's eliminate those qualities from inside our kishkas, from inside our heart, and let's bring someone else into our lives. Celebrate their successes, be there in their times of pain, and help each other on our respective journeys up this mountain. On a practical level, if you know someone that has a need for Passover, please reach out to them, reach out to me. Happy to help in any way that we can. It's a very different Passover this year. The world is a bit different. right now. And more than ever, we need to focus not only on ourselves, but also on the other. We may need to practice social distancing, but even within social distancing, we can be as close as ever to be there for another. So thank you very much for joining me this morning. A quick announcement regarding, thank you. A quick announcement regarding other upcoming opportunities of study. Every day, Monday through Friday, we have a daily dose called the Power Parsha, 12 to 12:15, so noon to noon 15, which is not a time. We have the opportunity to study a little bit of a dose of Torah. Monday nights at 7:30, we study a Hasidic discourse on the holiday of Passover. Tuesday nights at 8, we study the Talmud on Passover. Wednesday night at 7:30, we have a Torah studies class on Passover. And Thursday night at 8 o'clock, we have Cooking with Rabbi Ari, Passover recipes this Thursday. Also, very important, tomorrow night, in addition to Maimer Mondays, we also have our Rosh Chodesh Society class for women. So it's a women's only class, but this is an in the era of Zoom broadcasts. So who's going to know? By the way, I'm not saying, whoa, I'm not saying, all bets are off. I'm just saying, though, you type in your username as Sarah and you keep your camera off, who knows? I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just saying if you did that, who would know? I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying Zoom. So tomorrow night, I will be teaching the Hasidic discourse at 7:30. At the same time, Mrs. Dina Schusterman is also teaching this Rosh Chodesh Society class. If you're on the list, an email should have gone out, I don't know, in the last few days about it. If you want the details for that Zoom link, let me know. I can send it to you. Otherwise, Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful week, a blessed week. The craziness should end. The pain should end. The suffering should end. Let us always keep our hearts open to each other. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, and blessings for everyone. Shalom.
Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see everybody.
Rabbi.
Pleasure. Good to see you all. To good health.
Bye, you too.
Bye. Take care.